New World Rise of the Angry Earth has been with us for 2 weeks now, and as well as the usual quirks and bugs that seasoned MMO players have come to expect with expansion releases, here's looking at you, Digital Poo. Overall, the game has been a resounding success. It's come with a raft of changes that update the player experience, the gameplay loop, and ultimately make things much more accessible for casual players, I would say more than ever before for this game. What do I mean by casual? Well, if you're of a certain age or in a certain place in your life, you've likely felt that sinking realization that you just don't have as much time to devote to a game as you used to. It might not be realistic to spend 6 hours a night grinding out that piece of armor anymore. Maybe you work full time. Maybe you've started a family, or maybe there are just other things that need your attention these days. It happens to all of us. I've never been a huge fan of grind for grind's sake, and with Season 3 and the expansion release, Amazon Games have smoothed out the gameplay experience for those of us looking to grab a cheeky hour or so of adventuring in the evening between work projects and diaper changing. Here are 4 game-changing ways that New World has become way more casual friendly. Number 1. Exit expertise levels. Call it watermark, expertise, light level or power level, you all know what I'm talking about with our first entry. If you've ever played New World, Destiny, or a slew of other games in the past, you might have encountered this mechanic before, and now thankfully, it's gone. Expertise, or watermark for OG New World players, introduced a gear grind on top of your gear grind. No longer could you farm a piece of gear, put it on, and see your gear levels go up to the value of that piece of loot. No. Equip that piece of loot, and you would see its gear score drop down to your own personal gear level, only increasing by small increments as higher and higher level loot drops at a slow, incremental rate. It was painful. It's an artificial barrier designed to prevent players from reaching top gear score too quickly, and it also feels incredibly punishing to the casual player. Well, thankfully, Amazon agreed and have done away with this system entirely. Now, when a piece of gear drops, you will equip it at its face value gear score. No downscaling and no watermarks. Instead, gear is gated in the time-honored way, content difficulty. Want gear score 700 drops? Hop into a mutated expedition or scour the world hunting artifacts. There are 1 or 2 other methods here which we'll discuss later in the video, but for now the key takeaway is expertise is gone. What you see is what you get. Number 2. Story Mode Expeditions. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but for most of us, our main reason for gaming is one thing, right? To have fun. If you only find yourself with an hour or so, a couple of nights a week to enjoy your favourite game, you might not find it particularly fun getting spanked in a base level dungeon when all you're looking to do is hang out with your mates, switch off for the evening, and enjoy that sweet, sweet dopamine from a dungeon-based power fantasy. With that in mind, number 2 on our list is some sweeping changes to the expedition system within New World. First and foremost, base level expeditions have been made simpler. Renamed Story Mode, these expeditions remove a lot of the more complex mechanics of yesteryear and provide a more traditional and accessible dungeon experience for those just looking for a smooth ride. Not only does this open up the party options you can run these with, for example, I've done a few fair runs without tanks or healers, but it means you're not going to be inspected by the rest of the group before heading out, and the experience overall is going to be a lot less taxing on your keyboard and your blood pressure. An extension of this is the revision to mutated dungeons. No longer is the player base divided between 10 levels of mutations. These have been simplified and condensed down to M1 to M3. There's a bigger difficulty curve between each level, but it means that when you're in the mood for a challenge or you have a little more time on your hands, each level should have more teams searching for players, making this overall experience much smoother also. Number 3. Wave goodbye to Wards and Banes. Number 3 is closely related to the Expeditions update, and it's probably my personal favourite on this list. It's such a huge change to the gameplay experience in New World that it definitely deserves its own place on this list. It is, of course, the removal of Wards and Banes. When I first started playing New World, my mind was blown at the idea that you needed a separate gear setup for each different enemy type in-game. To survive even a base level expedition, players would need at least some Ward and Bane perks on their gear for a fair chance of survival. Want to run a mutation? Forget it. Without a full set of Ward and Bane gear for each enemy type, you'd just be a drag on the group. This led to players collecting an insane amount of gear sets to cover every eventuality. It wasn't uncommon to find long-term players rocking 12 or more different sets just to keep up. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. Well, thank any god you can think of, once again Amazon has agreed. The logic behind the system sounds like an intricate feature, but the reality just wasn't very player friendly, and now, hallelujah, it's gone. Yes, it's still worth optimizing gear where possible, and you're still going to find best-in-slot stat requirements for more challenging content, but the removal of wards and banes is like lifting a millstone that's been hanging around our necks. You will no longer need to be carrying an entire wardrobe's worth of clothing around with you, and that has entirely opened up this game in new and exciting ways for players. And finally, number 4, improved crafting systems. The fourth and final entry on our list is crafting. I'm about as far as you can imagine from being a master crafter in New World, but even I couldn't ignore this change when making this video. I've heard nothing but praise for the updates we've had to the crafting system, on the Discord, on the Reddit, in other streams, everywhere you can mention. Previously, while it was possible to craft a max gear score piece in New World, the chances were virtually impossible. You see, you weren't really crafting items at a set level, but rather within a level range. This means that instead of crafting your gear score 625 piece and going on your merry way, you'd be crafting at a range, for example, from gear score 600 to 625. Whether the piece would come out top end or not, who knew? It was a complete roll of the dice. Well, with the release of Season 3, not only can you craft level-specific gear, but you can select each individual perk on that item. Yes, you can craft best in slot. Now, I really need to bring some attention to one very big caveat here. Crafting best in slot pieces is not going to be cheap. The price of materials on the trading post at the moment is fluctuating, yes, but even once it settles down, it's fair to say that these materials are going to be expensive. Also, you require items from your faction trader which are pricey and time gated. Chromatic seals cost 5,000 gold and 20,000 faction tokens, and they're capped at just 1 purchase per day, while Azoth inductors, the big boys, cost a massive 25,000 gold pieces, 75,000 faction tokens, and these are capped at just 1 per week. Nevertheless, if you don't have hours upon hours to grind best in slot items, this is a totally viable route for a casual player to reach endgame nirvana. One more thing to add here. Artifact and named items which drop in the world can be leveled up to gear score 700 also. For example, my syncretic bow, considered by most to be a current best in slot bow, took me 3 hours tops to farm, but could be leveled to a max in a few minutes at a gypsum kiln after spending just a few thousand gold. New World has never been more accessible to casual players than it is right now, and personally I think that is a really great thing. It means if you are trying to balance real life commitments, work, family, whatever the case may be, with your gaming, you can actually do that. You can get in game, you can enjoy what you're doing, and you can come out feeling like you've actually achieved something. That being said, I do want to add there is still plenty to do for the hardcore players. You have your mutations, there's a worm raid, 3 modes of PvP, there's plenty there to keep you busy, and if you think Amazon games haven't got more in the pipeline, you can think again. And that's it, that's the video. I hope you found it helpful, or at least a little bit entertaining. If you did, please consider hitting like and subscribe, it's really going to help me with the algorithm. These were my top 4 for what I think make the game a lot more casual friendly this time around. If you have any, I'd like to hear your feedback on that too. Oh, and by the way, seeing as we mentioned it, that syncretic bow, if you'd like to know how to farm it, you can do that by clicking the video now. I'll see you next time.